This is a great crowd. I was told that if the weather's good in Minnesota, nobody comes inside. So I'm very happy that everyone is here today.
It's impressive. 14-14 at halftime, Gophers, just so you know. That's where everybody else is at. So.
I understand. No, fair. I totally get it. I also am very happy that you're supporting journalism, especially local journalists, in this way. And I want to thank the governor for also sitting down to have a conversation. Because, as we know, it is increasingly rare to have these moments. And so I want to say thank you in advance. And I'm going to start, because I am a New York Times journalist, with a hard-hitting question for you.
Got it.
Which is, I had noticed on your social media that you repaired a car door. And I just wanted to know, first of all, if you can do mine. But secondly, what does that do for you? I mean, you have a very stressful job. So why take the time and do that?
Yeah, it's... They'll probably hit me on it. We got like the repair shop there on Summit Avenue now that I pull in. We had a friend of ours, she's going to school, the friend's daughter is going to school here in Minnesota, and her car got the back door dinged in. And they took it to look and see how much it is, and to have it repainted and do all that. You all know it's super expensive. And I said, I think we could like go to a salvage yard and buy a door from that same year that matches the color, and I can put it on. So they shipped it from Texas. The original estimate was like $4,200. So we got this thing shipped for $600, and in my backyard, I took that door off that. It surprisingly went back together okay. Put it on, and it looks good. But I said I was out this morning talking to people, and there was a group of runners out, and I know this is the most surprising thing, that I am a pretty active runner. And I was on that street, and they were a group that is helping folks as they come out of addiction or incarceration and get them into running, because it's a really tight community. And they were listing all the folks they in. I said, well, add governors to that list, because whether it's repairing a car out there running, that is mental health day for me. So I'm glad you saw that. I was super proud of it. My wife was not really impressed by it, and I'm like, I felt like when the door went on and I clicked the thing and then the windows went down, I was out there by myself, but it was a moment like, if some of you remember Tom Hanks in Castaway, fire! And I was like, I said, it works. And so I know just enough about car repair to be dangerous, but I wouldn't turn to the professionals when you need to. But I'm glad you saw that one. That was fun.
I did see it. So obviously the big news for you right now is that you are running for a third term in the state. And you know, it is interesting. This is pretty unprecedented. No governor has ever won re-election for a third term. Most states have term limits because they don't want people to run and run and run. Why are you running? And what is it that you haven't done in the last, 2 terms that you want to do now?
Yeah, those are the questions. And when it comes to term limits and those things, I've never been supportive of them, but I think all of us in this room know that the way you get term limits is by campaign finance reform and fair redistricting, because then you'll get people to vote. But with that being said, this was a hard decision. Lulu, you've heard it, these folks in this room know, it's a very tough summer, and I've made no bones about it. The murder of Melissa and Mark Hortman and the attempt on John and Yvette was horrific for all of us, very personal for me with the speaker. And as we thought about it, and then the Annunciation shootings and some of the things we've seen, I took very seriously, I think, that I don't believe I'm the only one who can do this. I do believe when you're running for election, there's certain fundamental things you have to do to make sure you win. And I got to be honest with you, I think one of the 2 things on this is somebody asked, well, nobody's ever run 1/3 term. Well, nobody had to govern with Donald Trump as president. And I think that is a unique situation where Minnesota, the things we do to try and make sure that we are at least speaking up or protecting folks. And the second thing is I think we've done amazing things that still need to be done. I would name a couple things. Right now, you can't be singularly focused as a governor, but guns. We have got to do something on gun violence. We have to move that. And I think I have the capacity, the credibility, and the experience to do that. And then there's other things to improve quality of life. One of the things I'd really like to see us get done is universal child care that's affordable for folks, because I think it's holding back It's holding back our economy. And again, on the things that, whether it's paid family medical leave, where it's feeding our children, or whether it's addressing climate change, I know you're going to go to the next one, but I think Minnesotans, we got to brag a little more. Yesterday, we broke ground for a company called Niron Magnetics. Niron Magnetics, I think this is going to be like a big company someday, spun out of the University of Minnesota with university talent. You know the story here, whether it's the pacemaker, whether it's 3M, whether it's whatever it is. This Niron Magnetics is the first company in the world that makes permanent magnets that don't use rare earth metals. And the reason that's a big deal is it doesn't make us dependent on those rare earth metals, both importing them from China and mining in very dangerous situations. Both of these things are done with iron, and the process that they have came out. So I think I want to see these things through. I want to see us protect science. I want to see us innovate. I want to see Minnesota stand out in those areas. And I think the experience I have lets me do that. And someone said, yeah, but you've been doing this. I said, I could run for 4 more terms and I would still be younger than the president is today. So there you go. We got more.
Well, we're going to get to some of the things.
I'm not running for 4 more terms, just so.
I was about to say, that's breaking some news here. I want to talk about some of the things that you mentioned just now, but before that, I did notice that you might have some competition. The MyPillow CEO, Mike Lindell, has announced he might run against you, and I was wondering if you had any thoughts of that.
Well, I was thinking that might have been a more interesting interview than this one for you, if you had. Yeah, I'm always glad, and I say this in all seriousness, so I'm always glad and appreciative of people, especially in the environment we're in, if they're willing to put themselves out there and run. But you need to clearly know every skeleton in your closet will be public, and I think those are things that, you know, we're going to have a conversation on this, but it'll be interesting.
Do you think he's a serious contender?
Yes, I do. I do. I think there would be a good chance because, and it will depend. Every one of the folks who is running have made it clear they want and are seeking the endorsement of Donald Trump. And I would argue that none of them are closer and none of them have more ties to the president than him. So I think it's a very real possibility. And here in Minnesota, you all know how this works. Whether you get the endorsement, then you run a primary, and a August primary, lower turnout or whatever. Yeah, I think it's possible. I hope so, but so.
You think he'd be
just full disclosure.
You think he'd be good, someone good to run against?
Yeah, I think so. I think that would be good. I'll brush up on my pillow knowledge, and we'll go from there.
Before we get to some local issues, I obviously wanted to talk to you about your running mate's book, which has made a lot of news. You were in it. I know you've read it. And I was just wondering, you know, throughout the book, she really talks about she was worried that she was treated unfairly, that the Democratic Party did not give her props, and that she could have won with more time, that you both could have won with more time. I mean, do you think 107 days was the problem?
Well, I don't think it helped, and I think after the fact, especially when you lose an election, it's hard to say, you know, if we'd have done this, we'd have done this. I think you have to have that conversation. You got to do some deep soul searching. There's things that we could have done differently. As far as the book goes, I think it was incredibly fair. This was a historic candidate who she herself made very clear not to talk about that. I think we had a short amount of time. I was saying I guess I can't call my book 90 days because that's how long I was on it. But I think it was fair. And look, I see how some people respond to this, and I think it is some of the problems that she was highlighting. I saw somebody, a journalist, call it a burn book, which is so disrespectful to a female candidate. And a burn book coming from the Mean Girls movie that you make a list of, you know, write down people you don't. She didn't do that at all. It was incredibly fair.
Do not use the word burn book, even though it's
right. You know what I'm talking about? I saw somebody do that, and I'm furious about that. So look, I think she's got a valid point, and her experience is valid and true. As far as being on that campaign, I was incredibly proud. Be very clear. We laid out a plan for more affordable housing. We wouldn't be in a soybean crisis in this country country or a foreign crisis. We would be moving with our allies in concert. We would not be cozying up to Russia. We would be standing with the brave Ukrainians who are defending democracy. Those things were all real, and they were laid out ahead of time. So when somebody said, well, she said, I told you so, yes, she did. So you don't have to like it that somebody says that, but she did. And I think she did a fantastic job. I tried to do the best I could do. The story of the interview, now it got out there. I had to, people who know me, I cannot keep a secret. I tell everybody, I just like to tell stories. And so that I had to keep that quiet, but that vetting, and they dropped me off at a dog park, and somebody picked me up, and I stayed at a Holiday Inn outside of town, Holiday Inn Express outside of town, because I have a video for myself. I woke up, they wouldn't send any staff with me. They sent one trooper. We had to get a truck that was registered from somewhere else other than Minnesota, flew in outside to Baltimore or whatever, and then went in that morning, and I took a video of myself. I don't always get interviewed for Vice President of the United States, but when I do, I stay at Holiday Inn Express. So, and it happened. And so the way she told the story, what I didn't know was, I turned out to be kind of a really interesting tidbit, the driver who picked me up, and then we drove, and then we went in a back way or whatever, that was part of the interview, that they were seeing you. So I'm like, damn, this is a beautiful yard. I said, how do you mow it? And I'm asking her, how do you mow the yard of this? And asking her where she came from and everything. And that got in the book that said Governor Walz was talking to, and maybe when you're going for an interview, you should have been asking about other things. But my job was there to support her and have Kamala Harris win the election. And the question she asked, you'd appreciate, where I think it made the difference. Because look, at that point in time, I'm freaking out and said, damn, I caught the bus, now what? Type of thing. It became apparent to me. I'm like, damn, the days come up to they're going to pick us. And she asked me, what do you think the job is? I said, well, I don't really know what the job is, but I know the organizational chart. It's the president and the president's chief of staff and everybody who works for the president and the person who mowed that yard out there, and then there's the vice president. You tell me what we need to do. And they all smiled, and I think right there she said, he knows what the job is. So you're there to support. So as far as the book and things like that go, I think she has every right to be critical. I do think I let her down on a couple things. And I warned them, my Minnesota nice thing is, if somebody's being nice to me, I'll be nice to them.
You're talking about the debate with J.D. Vance, where she
these people have
you.
seen me debate. I know my subject. I'm pretty good at it. I don't think I'm particularly mean.
Do you think you helped J.D. Vance win by allowing him in that debate to show a more collegial side of himself that perhaps had not been evident to the American people?
Well, I think it did do that. His in the numbers afterwards, I was still, went up on this, but if the vice presidential debate mattered, Dan Quayle would have never been vice president with Lloyd Benson. But it did matter. It did matter, though, and it was, I think, in the moment we were in preparing for that, and quite honestly, we did not prepare for him to be more cordial. The expectation was that he would do the false attacks and do some of that, and they didn't. So I'll give them this, they were well prepared. But my goal was to try and find, getting there, and I'm saying, we all want to fix immigration, but you're doing the dogs and cats stuff. What we're talking about is fixing the system, adjudicating, asylum claims faster. That was viewed as me trying to find common ground, and the teacher in me, and this is nervous tick or habit that we have when you're a teacher, when someone else is speaking next to you, you instinctively nod and listen and try and listen. And that was viewed as, and the vice president took it that I was agreeing on some of the things that were a personal attack on her, and it wasn't that at all. Because when we're teachers or in any other one, like, that's really interesting. It's dumb as hell, but it's very interesting. And, I was doing that. So I think in fairness to it, but I think we have to reckon with what she brought up, some very valid points. How's America going to elect someone that's other than an old white guy? How are we going to figure this out, how we're going to do that? Because she ran a great campaign. She had things out there, and she kept getting asked, where are your plans? Are right here. And then I just read today, I went back and looked at some of the fact check. There was a huge article that showed up about Kamala Harris is not telling you the truth when she said Donald Trump will put troops in the streets. Well, she was right. And would that have been judged against someone else? I don't know.
Last question on this. I want to read you a quote, because you did make a big splash once you were announced, and everyone was very excited. But according to a former chair of the DNC, you were, quote, handcuffed by the campaign. And I'm wondering if you'd been given more opportunity to speak your mind, to do unscripted interviews, to, you know, a lot of the criticism was that it was so pre-planned, it was not spontaneous, it wasn't what we're doing now, it was very, you know, we're gonna sit down, there's gonna be a message. If you could have been more you, the you that I'm kind of seeing here, do you think that might have changed things?
I don't know, but I use this analogy, and I think this is a fair critique. I said, and I use my sports analogy. We were playing not to lose rather than playing to win, and I kind of felt that it was always going to be tight, and we had to do something different. But I think the big thing is that I signed on to that campaign to support Vice President Harris to become president, and I followed their guides. Now, for me to second guess afterwards, I told them very candidly, you know, the strength when they do the vetting on you, it's like a soul colonoscopy. I mean, I'm like, when I was 8, I sold a Super Ball from the local store. I wanted one, I took it, and you know, so it's kind of like I was back having to do 10-step, go back and apologize to everybody I did. But I told them, I said, look, you'll get, I think from me, I said, you'll get 80% pretty good stuff. You'll get 10% that I think is pretty spectacular, and then you'll get 10% that is really problematic. And I said, just because of the kind of the nature of speaking and the storytelling and some of that, I do watch them, and I said this, it is so oppressive with the Secret Service. When we tried to go to the dog park, we had boats on the rivers. We had, you know, I saw where J.D. Vance got criticized that they had to raise the river for his family to be on there. That probably wasn't his fault, honestly. See, I gave him some credit. But it's just so oppressive because my thing is that I would like to stop and like we do at this, like at the state fair, just wander and talk. Well, you saw my state fair visit, millions of Secret Service cameras. They rush me in, I give somebody an ice cream cone and we act like we're at the state fair and they rush me out and it all looks contrived. So I'm trying to convince people, and I think they get it, that authenticity, that retail politicking, and here's what I would say, not me being more. I don't know how that would have been. If they saw more of me, they might have voted even more the other way. But the vice president, I don't know how many of you knew this. We were down in Savannah, Georgia. We stopped at a school outside in a rural one. We're going down these roads where there hadn't been a presidential ticket, been down there in over 40 years. I think Carter, maybe the last one, maybe 50 years. And we're going down these roads, and there's little girls out there, black girls, with signs up, we love you, Kamala, and doing all this. And I'm like, we stop and kind of spontaneously off the record at a school. We go into the band room, the band's playing the fight song, the football players have on their jerseys, the teachers are lined up in the back. And it's just kind of exciting thing. The press is there and they're gonna do something, and I got to introduce her, and I did it, and I think it was good, and she comes up there and says, well, I remember when I played in the band. And I'm like, she's a band kid. No one in America knew that. No one knew those of you in here who are band kids know you're like, holy crap, that's a voting block. They'll be with you, they'll go. They'll go. You know what I'm talking about. And as a teacher, I saw her get into that. We did this when she was here as vice president. We stopped at Central High School spontaneously.
Was she afraid?
No,
or was she being told not to do it?
No, and that's people say, like the consultants, I think you get at this. Look, you have to be coordinated. There's a limited amount of time. They put the charts out there. Somebody's polling every day and doing these things. And I just think you have to make a decision. And look, she said it in the book, and I thought the most poignant thing was because I had this moment with my daughter.
Just one moment, please.
Yeah, give money.
No, that's not money.
Oh, I thought
give money too, but actually hand over your card
ask
for
questions too. So
give money too, though.
But I think the pressure was, and people, you know, they would say to me, you know, oh, you must feel terrible that you lost. I'm like, white governors in America who ran for vice president will probably land on their feet okay. You don't need to worry too much. I think the stress she felt and the stress I felt, and when the times when we talked, it was hard not to do this. You're trying to be optimistic, but it was always in the back of my mind, what if we lose? How bad this will be? What if we lose? And I think that plays into some of the thinking. And I think they laid it out. She was much more in tune to some of the strategy on this. But I think second guessing it, it's kind of hard that, my God, when you watched her debate, when you watched the things we were putting out, when you watched the rallies, I really thought we were going to win. I've been in races where I wasn't sure, but I really thought we were going to win. And when it didn't happen, pretty catastrophic.
I want to ask you about the 2016 election. You know, you had a lot of people saying, you know, oh, you must feel terrible that you lost. I'm like, I want to turn to actually something that is catastrophic, which is the situation with political violence in this country, and of course something that you here know really, really well.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There we go. I want to turn to something that is catastrophic, which is, of course, the situation with political violence in this country, which I know you know here really well. You lost a very close friend. There have been other shootings. And I'm wondering at this moment, what do? We seem to be spiraling into a situation which everyone feels that is getting out of control.
Yeah.
What do we do?
Yeah, and I think as an elected official, I have to be very cognizant of how I talk about this. I admit I will get passionate. I'm glad we're in a church because I do swear more than I should. Some of you know I don't drink or I don't smoke, but I'm a connoisseur of profanity and I'm working on it. My wife is working with me, but I said some of that. But obviously, how unacceptable this is, the horrific nature of what happened here in Minnesota, what's happened in other places, and what happened 2 weeks ago with Charlie Kirk. Obviously unacceptable, but what have we done that has created an environment for that? And I heard somebody say, look, those of you who are old enough in here, whether it was JFK, then Bobby, then Martin, Kent State, there's the belief that you're always at the most important. But I heard somebody in that time say, that felt shocking, this feels normal. And I don't know if they're right, but I think the sense of normalcy that we're seeing, the sense of a former FBI agent being indicted just for that. I've listened in terms of Melissa's murder. I've heard the Attorney General of the United States speak untruths before the case has even come up. So I think what we have to understand is how do we ratchet that down? It doesn't help when the president says, these are my enemy. I don't just disagree with them, they're my enemy. But I am really struggling with, that does not mean that we can't passionately debate where we disagree. Where that veers into is conspiracy theory. And there's a whole cottage industry making money on the conspiracy theories. And I think with access to fast media, access to all of this, we're not sophisticated enough to tell what are Russian and Chinese plants on this, because you can see it spring up right away. The conspiracy theories that spun up around the murder of Melissa and Mark, those are very damaging. So I take responsibility to tone some of my things down. I also think, though, that there's a chance to chill us from saying this. The president is saying you can't call us things. I do think he's an authoritarian. I do think he is leaning towards fascism, and those are words that have meaning, not to rally up, it's not hate speech. They are English language words that allow us to describe a situation that I think you could say that these things are happening. So I don't quite know how to talk about that. I don't know yet.
I think, one of the things that we've seen from this administration is the very real desire to chill speech. That is certainly the intention. They would say, and have said, that the left at this particular moment has a problem with political violence that it is not grappling with.
Well, the data does not show that. I think we can always work with it. Are there those on the left? There certainly are, and we've seen it. We had Brian Thompson murdered here in Minnesota. You can agree or disagree with United Healthcare, but this is a family man who was the co-chair with my wife of the Special Olympics Committee here in Minnesota. And so, and that was, probably leftist ideology, what it looked like. The data shows, and they just scrubbed it on this, just to be very candid, the FBI going back through multiple administrations, the threat of violence in this country was mostly precipitated by white nationalism and white supremacy. Does that mean there aren't others out there? No, but the idea of that the left is fueling this, the facts don't support it, but what gets in a trap on this is, if it feels like I'm putting it down and trying to blame it on the right, it simplifies this into a left-right issue, and then people are dug in on their beliefs and how quickly people pick up on conspiracy theories that make no sense and they grab them. So, look, we've never had a president. I didn't ever hear Barack Obama call them the enemy. I didn't ever hear Barack Obama say we should arrest Rush Limbaugh. we in Minnesota, and I keep saying this, I don't ever try not to personally attack people. I disagree with their policies, and I think we get caught in this trap. And I'm asking all of you, how do we push back on this when it sometimes feel like everybody wants to, or when it's being reported on? We need to be fair. You know, to be fair, this person did this, and then we go out and find that. I saw this during the damn healthcare debate. I would quote the Dartmouth Atlas of Health Statistics in a debate, and my opponent was in Toronto, and his cab driver said their system stinks, and that's why we don't need to do it. And I'm like, your cab driver in Toronto is the same equivalency as the Dartmouth Atlas of Health Statistics. And I feel like in this mode, we're into that, scrubbing this data, not allowing us to have data, not allowing us to say that there is a problem in the nationalist movement on the white Christian nationalism. It's true. Are there left-leaning groups that would do this? Certainly so. But I think the preponderance right now is fostering this continuous misinformation campaign is just so, and man, the Russians and the Chinese, they didn't have to fire a shot in a lot of this, and look where they're at. They have us at each other.
I have a few questions from you that actually echo some of the things that I was going to ask about. You know, fraudsters stole upwards of $1 billion through schemes targeting safety net programs run by state agencies. And the question here is, how could you have caught and prevented the many fraud cases we hear about? What would you have done differently, and what would you say to people who blame you?
Yeah, well, look, you accept responsibility for the good things, whether we are one of the 12 states AAA bond rated with fine finances, where we're a top state for kids. I tell the Republicans, make sure you give me credit for those if you're saying this. These organizations and these agencies are professionals. And I think the one thing here that obviously stated on this, fraud, and these people are going to go to prison. This angers me more than anybody, because the programs they're hitting are ones that feed children and those less fortunate, ones that treat autism, ones that deal with homelessness, especially some of our most chronically unhoused neighbors.
But how could it have happened? I mean, that is a lot of money.
Well, here's what I would tell you, and you saw it last week. There was one in the paper that said another fraud scheme, and I saw Republicans screaming about it. It had nothing to do with us. It was the federal government under Donald Trump's administration with the PPP program. One of the things here is, I think there's several things that set this up. What more generous state? The laws are written to move this money as quickly as possible to improve people's lives. In Minnesota, we contract a lot with nonprofits or third-party organizations to move this money out. The legislature writes what the parameters are, and the professionals try and get that money out. If you want to cheat, just like, you know, Nigerian prince asking you for your money at home or whatever, you might be able to do that. One of the things here is we stopped payment very early. The people who we stopped payment on sued us in court. They reversed it, and we had to pay them again. Those people are now in prison after the fact. Last legislative session, I was given the authority that I can stop payment. If you're wondering why you're seeing it so much in the paper, because we're just stopping payment, not going to court and bringing these people up. We have a good partner in the federal agencies helping with us. I think the Republicans, they're the people who drive by and say there's a fire. They're not helping put it out. We didn't have some of the tools necessary. Should we be, and I said this, yes, we need to be more skeptical, but I hope everybody understands the minute we start saying that, there are going to be legitimate people who could have used these services are either going to get slowed down or not get them. We have to strike a better balance in that and make the case, and I think we have some of those tools now. We could use AI. I asked that we could try and get it out there, but the state agency's role is to take the application as the law says. If the person meets the requirements to fulfill that, the problem lies in then if the person lied on the application. Now, should we go out and check every place? Absolutely. And I think right now the question we're going to have in Minnesota is, do we shut all these programs down all the way across the board and stand them back up again, which is going to mean a state that delivers better services with the lowest childhood poverty rates. 151 million meals were delivered to children. And I want to keep in mind, not a single one of these things of people involved in this fraud is a state employee. So where they make the case, maybe trying to say this, it's not corruption, it's fraud. Should we do more? But I also want to say this, if someone breaks into your house, should you have had more locks on it? Probably. Should you do that? But blaming those professionals over at DHS, now I will say this, some of them could have done better, and we've changed leadership and we've moved people. I do think there has to be accountability. My take to them is,
because they're stealing taxpayer money. I mean, ultimately, they're stealing the money of the people here, and I think that's why people are upset.
Yes, and then it's the second order of that is they're stealing food from hungry children. They're stealing food. That's less money that we can put into programs that make a difference. So I'm fully on that. I will continue to send these people to prison. I will tell you this, I think as long as we have state government programs, they will do it. I do think that the COVID pandemic and some of the loosening of the rules made this very, very appealing. I myself had to go back and have my team, 5 states, somebody applied for unemployment insurance under my name in 5 different states. I was employed here, I was here, but got a stolen number. So yes, I would assure you, I take responsibility. You're going to see more stories. You're going to see more people going to prison. We have more tools. Is there more that we can do? Yes, I do think so, but that's going to require putting more of the resources into some of the state, and I think, honestly, maybe slowing down how we get things out. And that worries me, that there's people who truly need these services.
We only have time for one more question, and I know it's a big one, which is your push to get an assault weapons ban.
Yes.
You've tried to call a special session. That has not happened. It looks like it might not happen. The question here is, please, can Minnesota ban high-capacity, high-powered guns? And at this moment, it looks like the answer is no.
Yeah, and this is one that I am, like all of you, this is horrific. It was this week, a gentleman named Mark, whose son Danny was at Sandy Hook, and of Sandy Hook Promise. He was in my office back after Sandy Hook when the group of almost 24 parents with their dead 7-year-olds and the pictures of them asked to get a meeting with every single member of Congress who had received money or is endorsed by the NRA. And I was one of them. And I think, I can't quote for sure, but I think there was less than a handful of the several hundred that took the meeting. But I said, of course we take the meeting. Their children were shot dead, and they have every right to come in here. And I sat in there with them, sat with my kids, talked about Parkland, and started to move that there's no infringement on your Second Amendment rights. We have always limited the types of weapons. You don't have the right to have a nuclear weapon. I mean, it's not a ludicrous argument. It's a true argument. We've not had automatic weapons in this country since the 1930s that they've been banned. And now we have a new type of weapon that can fire 116 rounds in 90 seconds into the church over denunciation.
How do you move the needle on this, though?
So here's the deal. We're 67 in the House of Representatives. We're 33 in the Senate. They've got to have 34 to come in. We've got to have 68 to pass something. It has been made clear to me now that the Republicans have told me they do not want a weapons ban. I have continued to ask and said, also I'm asking you for, put it on the floor and let's have a vote. And the reason that they're not going to do that, I'll just say it in here, and if it makes the news and they said I mischaracterized their position, I did not mischaracterize their position. The Republicans could come in now, sign an agreement with me that we will hear their things, and I'm grateful. Some of them are saying we need to do more on mental health care, which I'm excited about. And I asked them why they didn't vote for it the last time I asked for more mental health care money. So you could do that. I'm glad to do it. But I said I'm demanding that we put that on the floor and get passage of an assault weapon ban or a high-capacity magazine ban. I'm just telling you that if folks who know how this works, we've seen it in different organizations or whatever, if they're unwilling to make the move, then we need a constitutional amendment in this state. We'll have voters vote because we know it's super popular. We know that as a hunter, you can do it. So I am not and cannot be pessimistic because I am meeting every week with these parents. I'm sitting down and I said, it shouldn't take Sandy Hook folks coming in there, and I said that, but we need to move people along. But when you sit in the living room of a family who's had their child killed and they're asking you to do this, you don't get to figure the political calculation of it. You don't get to figure and tell people that there's procedural hurdles or whatever. You just need to figure out how to get it done. And that's the mode I'm in right now. And I am trying to deal with this, trying to compromise, trying to do whatever. But I said I am going to the public and letting the public voice their opinion, because this is merchant of doubt stuff like tobacco. Just muddy the waters with statistics and say there's other things. Let's all be very clear. Every country on earth has mental health care issues. Many countries have gun ownership. Few, if any, basically one, has a problem with mass shootings with weapons of high capacity, ability to send it out, and that's the United States. That's the variable that's in this. And so all those other things would help us, but right now, I think in Minnesota, we need to show the country that it's not. I think, look, they're hoping that we forget. They're hoping we forget the names. They're hoping we forget the little kids. And you know what? It will probably happen because any day now we'll have another one, which we know. So I'm committed to it. And I think right now it's as simple as this. Just simply ask your representatives. And I told them, if you don't believe this is going to help, and you believe you need to have high-capacity magazines and that or whatever, why would you not proudly stand on the floor and vote for that? Just go ahead and vote for it. Why are we not having a vote? And all of us in here know why. Because there are some of those folks who would vote yes on the ban. And they might lose their seat, but you're not in it to win an election. You're in it to help people. So,
Governor Walz, thank you so much.